Just to give you a little bit of context, obviously you catch on that the writer is talking to Gaius, actually, and thanking him for being hospitable, for showing kindness to strangers. Now we find out that these strangers are actually fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. They're believers, but there's no references. These are people that might say that they're Christian, but they don't have any way of knowing who they are. You can't go on Google and search somebody and find out if they check out or if they don't check out in these days. And Gaius is being thanked for welcoming these total strangers from far off and for sending them out in a way that honors God. I want us to think today just a little bit, when was the last time that you showed true hospitality to a stranger? When was the last time that you treated them in a way that honors God, much less actually overcoming your own fear of meeting someone new or someone who looks different or sounds different? My journey in Scotland, I overcame this a lot. I encountered this a lot. And I encountered a lot of strangers. In fact, as I thought about it, they weren't the strangers. I was the stranger. Out of place, out of context, in a country not my own. There was a challenge. In fact, there was a dialect barrier. There was times where I was asked if I liked cats, and I said, yeah, sure, I eat carrots. I mean, there was times where I thought I was going deaf, and I had to ask people repeatedly to say to me once again what they had spoken because the accent was just slightly different enough that I couldn't fully understand. I stayed in hostels. I was in the midst of a crowd. Some people would speak, some people wouldn't. They'd sit off on the side, but others would speak freely. And I would meet people on buses and trains, and I would have short conversations. I would share a moment in life. I would share a blessing with them of space. I'm going to share with you today just a few of the people that I met. There's no way I can even begin to incorporate 3 months into just a short message, but I'm going to share just a couple of people with you, and I'm going to show you some pictures that hopefully will bring a smile to your face. Yes, the guy with the beard on the right, that's me. And you can see I was having a little bit of fun. I was at a festival. I was at a festival with 20,000 people. And this guy who is on the far left over there, his name's Andy, and he saved me. I had been in Inverness for a couple days, stayed at the hostel in the city center, and I had decided that this was not a place I could sleep very well because there were people coming in all night. There were 16 people in a small room, and I was making a point of staying in hostels, experiencing the world differently. But it was also on the city center, and there was noise until like 4:30 in the morning, racket right outside the window, and so I had traveled out, and I'd been hiking and camping and overlooking Glomac Falls, which was absolutely beautiful, for 3 days out in the wilderness hiking. And I'm hiking back. I'm soaking wet. I'm dirty and stinky. And I know that I'm going to go to this festival and I'm going to be outside another whole weekend, 4 more days in the midst of mud and rain. And I'm thinking, I just need a shower. I just need a bed. And I could have checked into a hotel or a bed and breakfast. I could have looked for one of those. Instead, I looked on this thing called couch surfing, which, by the way, some of you have given me a hard time for the people that I've hosted in my own home on couch surfing, people from Germany and China and Norway and Canada and all over. And those are some amazing experiences. But this guy was on couch surfing. I looked him up and I texted him and I said, I'm coming in and I'm been hiking. I need a bed and a shower, and can I do my laundry? And this guy responded and said, sure, I'll pick you up at the bus stop. He picks me up at the bus stop, takes me home, lets me get cleaned up, does my laundry, and gives me a bed. And then he's like, by the way, I have a gig tonight. I'm a guitar player, and I've got a gig down at the local bar. Why don't you just come join me? By the way, the first thought that I have in my mind is, in America, when we're busy, when we've got something scheduled, we've got work going on, and somebody asks if we've got a little bit of time. I mean, this may be a family member or a friend or whatever, and we're like, no, I don't have any time for that today, right? Let alone if a total stranger messages you and looks like I was starting to look at this point, a little shaggy, a little rough around the edges, coming in from hiking. But he invites me in and then he invites me out. And we're at the bar and dancing and listening to music and he's introducing me to friends and we had a great time. Not only that, but after a couple meals and a night at his place, he drops me off at the bus stop and I go to this festival and I find out he's playing at this festival of 20,000 people. And so he meets me there, he shows me around, introduced me to some of the other entertainers, and I'm listening and enjoying, and even one of the times he's performing late at night, all the other stages are closed down, and he's performing, and this group is gathered and dancing and singing. Some of the locals start talking to me again and say, wow, he's really cool, he's really good, and I'm like, yeah. He says, I wonder where he's from. I said, well, he's from Inverness, he's this, and I start talking a little bit about him. He's like, well, you're not from here, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I stayed at his house last night. He's like, what? The doors that opened and the opportunities that presented themselves because I was willing to actually ask for a place to stay. I was willing to humble myself and actually enter into a relationship with a total stranger. It was absolutely the biggest blessing I could have imagined. Let me look at the next one up here. This is a couple of guys that I met at the festival. We didn't share a room. They didn't give me a place to sleep because they had a tent set up, and I walked in, and it's 20,000 people. They're all setting up tents. It was almost 2 hours just to get through security to even get in the gate in this line. And I get in there, and I'm like, I just am looking for a place to put my tent down. So I walk up to these two strangers. I said, are you saving this area for anybody else? Is anybody else coming that you're saving place for a tent? Like, oh, no. Go ahead and pitch your tent. And I'm like, okay, I'll just set it right there and we'll go. And I sit down after I'm done putting my tent up. I sit down they pull out a beer. And they just welcome me. They say, come on, sit down. Let's talk a little bit. And we start talking, and I hear the story of their life and find out both of these guys are from Aberdeen area. They work the oil industry over there. And they just started sharing. The guy in the middle, he's about my age, but he's just retiring. He's going through a change in life. They bought a new house. They're moving. And he's talking about himself and wondering, what's my next step? What am I supposed to do? And we had some great discussion. After the weekend is over, they even gave me a ride 3 hours to another bus stop, direction of Edinburgh, where I was headed next. They showed me kindness and hospitality, welcomed me in a way that gave me companionship during that time. It was absolutely a blessing to not be completely alone in a crowd. The next one up here is, this is Victoria and her son Noah, and the guy taking the photo is Benjamin. And they have a home up by Elgin, and they're both teachers, and again, messaged, and they saw my itinerary and said, hey, are you looking for a place to stay? We'll host you. I'm like, that'd be great. And the nice thing about being hosted by somebody is not only are you not alone, but you have people who are willing to help guide you or tell you the interesting things to see and do. And so this hike that we're on, we're actually hiking the north coast of Scotland out to a castle that is literally buried in one of these ledges that crop out. In fact, you wouldn't even see it. It just looks like a bunch of grass. And you hike out onto the grass, and then you can go down into these holes that are literally holes in the roof and walk through this castle that is just buried, hidden out there. We spent a day together playing disc golf and adventuring in the community. They took me an hour and a half drive, dropped me off at my next location, and then even the week later, they came and joined me at one of the cabins I was staying at. All of these people are people that I've communicated with since I've been back, that I've kind of kept in touch with. In fact, one of them I'm not even going to show you today, don't have time to. He video chatted me on New Year's Eve to show me all of the fireworks going off over Edinburgh Castle. The next one up is John Duncan. We didn't share a home. He didn't offer me a place to stay, but I met him on the road, the St. Cuthbert's Trail. The first day, actually, I'm hiking, and I catch up to him and start talking a little bit along the way, and he's like, oh, don't stick around. You're walking faster than I am. Go ahead. And I'm like, okay. And actually, I hiked fast enough. I got I got to my destination before it started raining. I don't think he did. But we actually set up a place to meet that night. We got together, we ate a meal together, and again, shared life, shared stories. And then actually, we decided to walk the next day, the next whole day together, talking and sharing, learning about life in each other's situation. The next one is, I believe, Donald. This is a photo after I was there. He sent to me. He's all dressed up, kilt-worthy, ready for a wedding. This guy, again, would be one that saved me. I was hiking the Sky Trail and several days and exhausted. I'd been without water because I didn't have my tablets at that point, and the place that I was hiking had way more sheep fecal than water. And even the water I found was not what I would have considered something that looks worthy of drinking. But I've been hiking. I was exhausted. Again, I was soaked from the rain and wet from the feet, because anywhere you hike, even the trails that you're hiking on, they end up shin deep in water half the time. And I messaged this guy. He'd messaged me 6 months before and said, if you need a place, let me know. Well, I had told him, I said, I don't think I'm going to be in that area. I don't really think I'm going to need a place to stay. But so then I messaged him out of the blue and said, is that offer still stand? Because I could really use a place to crash for the night and a place to clean up. He said, sure, I'll pick you up. So he picks me up, takes me home, gives me a place to sleep, take a shower, do my clothes again, actually hang up my tent, which is totally soaked, and let it dry out. And this guy was very clean. He had what I would consider on the verge of a professional bed and breakfast, all set up to care for people who were coming in. In fact, when I was leaving, I actually helped him clean up and set up for the next couple people that he had coming in. But that one night turned into 4 nights. Because we sat down, we started talking that night and sharing stories, and I said, this is what I'm planning to do. This is what I'm looking forward to do in the next couple days. And he's like, well, why don't you just stay here? My place is right in the center of it. You can go from here and take the bus to this, or you can walk up to here and you can go see this from here, or I'll give you a ride over to this place and you can see this cave. And I'm like, wow. So I stayed, and again, we shared meals, fellowship, communion, life stories, experienced the blessing of life together. The last one, I think, is Alistair. He's a professional fishing gillie in Scotland. He lives on the Dinnet Estate, which is 23,000 acres, by the way. And he lives in one of the cabins on the estate. And actually, he messaged and offered me a place on the estate right there with him in his lodge. And we're just a walk from the river right there. And he's actually guiding a few other people while I'm there. He took me down and introduced me and showed me the cabin they were staying in and fishing out of. And then he gave me some instruction in fishing and showed me the different places I could fish, and I ended up spending a couple days with him. And actually went out and helped him scoop rock to even out the gravel roads that they had on the estate in different places one particular day. We shared, again, life together. All of these people are people who blessed me along the way. Out of them, 4 of them would say they were absolute atheists. 2 of them might have marginal faith. 1, I would say, probably has a strong faith. I got to asking myself the question, does it matter? Or why does it matter? Faith, no faith, different faith. Should we show kindness and compassion, mercy and love to the stranger? Unconditionally, based on who they are or where they're from or what they look like. their faith that they profess, does it matter? Or does it only matter that we follow the law of Christ, which we talked about last week, the law that Christ writes upon our heart that says love God and love the neighbor, love even the stranger? I think of these people and I think I was the stranger. They weren't the stranger. I was the one who was shaggy in a beard and rough around the edges, hiking. And I can just imagine some of them saying, why in the world would I want to invite you into my house again? I think of us in America and I think, who would have had time? Victoria, they invited me into their house even though their family, their parents were coming to town that week. We went to a military museum together with her parents. And I think to myself, how many of us wouldn't make the time a day for a friend, let alone an absolute stranger, if we had other things going on? How many of us would just shut people out because we're too busy? Our Americanized culture tells us we don't have time, or they're not a priority, or even better yet, we should be afraid of them, the other, the different, the stranger. Zechariah 7:9 says, the Lord Almighty says this, administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. What does it mean? What does it mean when we talk about a stranger? All these people had two things in common, I think, and I think all of us have something in common when we think about meeting new people. Crossing that boundary of relationships, connecting with a stranger. We all have these things in common. I think the first thing that happens every single time is we start with some measure of fear, don't we? Some measure of the unknown, some measure of worry about rejection or personality conflicts. Will we get along with them? Will we not? Will they reject us? Or actually, are they dangerous? We start with this, our hands up and fear of each other. When God's telling us that we should love each other. Talk about the story of the Good Samaritan, and who was it that reached out and cared for the person on the road? It was the one that they thought should have hated him the most. The one who would have been the most offensive, and yet that was the one who loved and who showed kindness and compassion. And I think of these people, and you know what? They did more than just meet my physical needs, more than just feed me a meal, more than just give me a place to sleep, but they also fed my soul. How true it is when we fellowship with each other, when we sit down for a meal, when we sit down and talk and share our life story, when someone shares with us, and I didn't go into some of the things that had been shared, some of the conversations that were had, but I would tell you that something happens to our spirit when we share that kind of communion and fellowship with each other. And quite honestly, even though so many of them would have professed to be atheists, I can tell you that they understood something about God. Whether they were willing to acknowledge God's authority or not, they understood the law that God has written upon all of humanity's heart to love one another. And quite honestly, I think sometimes they know how to love the stranger better than we do. And when I think about it, I sometimes get embarrassed about how we, as Americanized Christians, often do this to people rather than this to people. How often we keep them at a distance, afraid, rather than welcoming them in. Remember, Jesus welcomed all of us knowing that we were going to hurt him. Knowing that he was going to pay a great price for loving us. But it was still a choice that he made. Each of these people I shared today, they fulfilled their directive to love. And truth is, I was the stranger. I was the beneficiary. And I can tell you one of the things I learned most out of this time for me was learning the importance of being humble. I could have gone and gotten a hotel. I could have gotten a bed and breakfast any of those days. but in my humbleness, in my ability to ask for a room. I created friends who will be lifelong friends. I heard stories that I'll never would have had a chance to hear. I cared for people and I was able to pray with people, be the presence of God to people because I opened that door, because I crossed over that barrier of fear that keeps us out. Maybe you should ask yourself the question today, how do you measure up? How do we measure up compared to these individuals? Would we welcome in the stranger? Would we invite them into our daily life and even with our family? Would we show them the kindness and the generosity of Jesus Christ? I want this to be a practical sermon. I want you guys to actually think about this week, not just, leave this place thinking, oh, that was a good, thoughtful sermon. It makes me think about the way I view the world. I want you to go out this week and be challenged to meet people in a new way, to greet people in a new way, to show kindness in a new way. I want you to think about the stranger. Because this is what Christ has told us to do. I think we need to stop being so American, our Americanized Christianity. I think we need to even stop being so self-sufficient. I think we need to actually depend upon others and actually give graciously as well. To accept the kindness of others and extend compassion, be willing to receive graciously and give in abundance. This might take a lifestyle change or a thought process change. But how can we be Christ in community? How can we be the light of hope unless we're willing to start crossing that barrier instead of putting one up? Jesus says, go and make disciples, go and love in my name. And I challenge you this week, go and do it for God's glory.